I'm glad to be joined by two panelists. In Kyoto, Takasato Watanabe, who is the professor of emeritus at Doshisha University in Kyoto. Meanwhile, joining us in Beijing, Rong Ying, who's the vice president of the China Institute of International Studies. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for joining us. A lot of diplomatic shuttling by the Japanese leader recently.
Prime Minister Kishida, he is welcomed like that. However, he doesn't have the strong power influencing other countries. This time, the United States want to make Japan the later career to other countries in Southeast Asia. So Mr. Kishida decided to go to say hello with a little money to each country in the name of the economic assistance. However, you see dimensions of the international relations. One is politics, second is the economics, and third is military matters. But in Japan, the constitution prohibits to do anything militarily to other countries. So the next option is politics, but Prime Minister does not have strong power in the political world in Japan. So economic, you see, the means is the only mean to help other countries to help Japan in this matter.
Thailand, Indonesia, and Cambodia, they are hosting respectively APEC, G20, and the ASEAN Summit this year. How do you see the selective agenda on the one hand, and on the other hand, what does it say to, for example, to China?
Well, yeah, it's true. I think it's become the tradition for Japanese leaders to pay a visit by sort of capitalizing the so-called Golden Week. So almost, I think, all the previous prime minister would do like that, and Prime Minister Kishida is certainly not an exception since last October. But we have seen sort of intensified effort, diplomacy. Back in March this year, he visited India and Cambodia, and then this May, I mean, last week, he just visited, concluded the visit to Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand. And during the visit, I think he tried his best to send a message in the sense that, of course, the importance attached by Japan, in the sense that Prime Minister Kishida is pursuing his own version of sort of diplomacy. It was called a new sort of realist diplomacy for the new era. As a matter of fact, I can say, if you look at the talks, statements, and remarks, it's more or less the same as the so-called free and open Indo-Pacific, which is being pursued by the former previous leaders, including, I think, Prime Minister Abe. And of course, there's a very strong message for China. In other words, that certainly, I think the message is that while it wanted to compete with China economically, politically, and to some extent, I think in the defense sector, as we have seen that the deals agreement signed with Thailand, making Thailand as, I think, the fourth country that Japan has such kind of a relationship. Since the taking over of Prime Minister Kishida, he has tried his best, as our co-panelist, Professor Watanabe said, that to continue to play a role in this region, in the regional issues and beyond. Unfortunately, there are some constraints and limitations that have been Japan has to be sort of live with.
One of the things that Japan has to face is a difficult choice to a certain extent. On the one hand, there's the so-called Quad, Japan's close allied relationship with the United States. On the other hand, Japan and China are neighbors, and there are issues like the Korean Peninsula nuclear issue, which usually would need the support of neighboring countries in the region. There are many things that Japan has to balance. Professor Watanabe, how do you think the Japanese leadership is balancing right now, well, amid all the continuing changes?
Actually, Japan has the relations with United States only, militarily speaking, because we have several military bases inside Japan, including Okinawa. This means that when the United States says something to help her, Japan must do that. Also, the Japanese government knows that as far as US military bases are existing in Japan, other countries cannot do so serious things except wordings, militarily influencing. So Japanese people think that United States and Japanese government are doing anything for the people, but this is not true, actually. Now you see, Russia is, I dare say, invading Ukraine, and also other disputes in some other parts of the world. But now Ukraine problem is the biggest. However, Japan doesn't have big economic relations with Ukraine. So Japan is doing anything following the United States. So the people of Japan, especially the citizens movement people, they are not satisfied with this. So Mr. Kishida is put into trouble or difficulty. So he decided to go around in Southeast Asia.
Russia-Ukraine crisis, that seems to be a dividing factor, adding up to the division and drama among countries. Now, Professor Rong, China claims that it is taking a neutral position in this regard. How does China see the evolution of Japan's attitude in this regard?
With regard to Japan, I think it would be unwise for Japan to push the South Asian states, ASEAN countries, to take side on the question of Ukraine, because obviously, as we have seen that ASEAN countries, they have their own sort of views and own positions on that. And I think except the very few countries, almost most of them, they have not sort of taken a side, and they have pledged their sort of neutrality on that. And so the visit by Prime Minister Kishida herself, if it's meant to sort of sway or meant to push the ASEAN countries to follow the lines of Japan and not add an extension of the United States and NATO, I would say that they have not sort of succeeded. ASEAN, Southeast Asia, are very much important for Japan. It makes sense for Prime Minister Kishida to pay a visit, to talk with them, and to listen their views, as I think there are several important multilateral functions, events taking place. So it's a good occasion.
Professor Watanabe, Japan has been practicing a pacifist policy since the end of the Second World War. Now, it is a very sensitive subject, both for many in Japan and for Japan's neighbors. Now, some say defense spending, defense budget, as well as defense plans becoming ever more important for some. So how is Japan going through this internal debate, it seems, about, on the one hand, remain with its pacifist status, on the other hand, to protect itself as it claims?
Japanese Constitution, Article 9 says, Japan should not have any military power. However, this is not enough to defend ourselves. So Japan or Japanese people supported to build up the self-defense forces. In addition, the Constitution 9, Clause 9 says we should not, or we cannot have any, solution ways using the militarily weapons. So the speech is only the way to solve any international questions in this case too. However, we have the, as I said before, military bases of the United States in Japan, including in Okinawa. So this is very contradictory. But people know that after Russia invaded Ukraine, the public opinion of Japan is changing pro-militarism. Now you see more than 75% of the people support to, change the clause of the Constitution 9, not to have the weapons to the, enough weapons to defend ourselves. So this is very contradictory and also terrible things for our generation and also for the people of Japan who has, thought the how we can make this world peaceful.
I see. Professor Rong, your thoughts?
The pacifist constitution this year marks the 75th anniversary of that proclamation of the constitution, has helped Japan to achieve long-term peace and stability and development, and also of the region as a whole. I think it would be all right to some extent that if Japan, as a sovereign state, wanted to sort of revise or change the constitution in light of the changes. This is, I think, the sovereign issues, sovereign decision by Japanese, even though I understand that that's a very divided, debatable issues. But the question is that the constitution itself, the background, the context of the constitution itself has, and the revision of this constitution has bearings, has impact for regional peace and stability. So the process of the revision, or the idea of the revision and the process of that, has really have to take into account the responses, the reactions and the concerns of the regional countries, and making an excuse of the security sort of threat, which is not that there. And more importantly, I think making China as a threat to that is going to be counterproductive. And more importantly, I understand that the debate takes place in a context where the right-wingers, the conservative forces in Japan, has from time to time been making efforts to reject, to whitewash the history problems. And that makes, I think, the process, makes the issue even more complicated. But all in all, I think the region as a whole, and Japan in particular, I noticed that the general public are very much peace-loving, and I think it would be also good for the politicians, for the political parties, for whatever reason, to listen very carefully.
How do you see the changes that is going on in Asia?
The question, I think, facing China and Japan, the two is the second and the third largest economy and the regional countries, great influence, is how we can ensure the peace, prosperity that has been enjoyed in the past decades will be continued.
Frankly speaking, 50 years ago, I was a member of the Japan Table Tennis Association, or also International Table Tennis Association. I first, heard from the coach of the United States team that China invited USA team to Beijing. I was so surprised, but I was, lucky, happy to hear that. And since then, many things happened. I was invited by Chinese government and I met the late Prime Minister Zhou Enlai 5 times. I was invited to his house by his wife. So I know, you see, some parts of the actual change of the political matters. If the people support, lastly, or at that stage, government must follow. 50 years ago, like this, if the people of Japan now, you see, support the peaceful negotiations led by the Japanese government, we support. If not, if we continue, or Japanese government continues to be like the servant of the United States, this is wrong. People are now, you see, seeking for the new method of the peace making, in which will be more valuable in the future.